Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Jayam Vishnupada Paramahamsa Parivajrakacharya Sri Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai Anantikoti Vaisnava Vinda Ki Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Gaur Premanandi. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 10, entitled Bhagavatam is the answer to all questions. Text number 9. Ekam ekatarabhave Yada nopa labhamahe Chityayam tatrayo veda Sa atma svashraya shraya Ekam ekatarabhave Yada nopalabhamahe Chittayam tatrayo veda Sa atma svasraya shraya.
Ekam ekatarabhave
Ekam ekatarabhave Yada nopalabhamahe
Chittayam tatrayo veda
Chittayam tatrayo veda Sa atma svasraya shraya.
Ekam ekatarabhave
Ekam ekatarabhave
Yada nopalabhamahe Chittayam tatrayo veda Sa atma svasraya shraya. Ekam ekatarabhave Yada nopalabhamahe
Chittayam tatrayo veda
Sa atma svasraya shraya.
Ekam one Ekatara another Abhave in the absence of Yada because na does not Upalabhame Upalabhamahe perceptible Tritayam in 3 stages Tatra there Ya the one Veda who knows Sa he Atma the super soul Sva own Ashraya shelter Ashraya of the shelter. Translation. All 3 of the above mentioned stages of different living entities are interdependent. In the absence of one, another is not understood. But the Supreme Being who sees every one of them as a shelter of the shelter is independent of all, and therefore he is a supreme shelter. Purport. There are innumerable living entities, one dependent on the other, in the relationship of the controlled and the controller. But without the medium of perception, no one can know or understand who is the controlled and who is the controller. For example, the sun controls the power of our vision, and we can see the sun because the sun has its body, and the sunlight is useful only because we have eyes. Without our having eyes, the sunlight is useless, and without sunlight, the eyes are useless. Thus they are interdependent, and none of them is independent. Therefore, the natural question arises concerning who made them interdependent. The one who has made such a relationship of interdependence must be ultimately completely independent. As stated in the beginning of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the ultimate source of all interdependent objectives is the complete independent subject. This ultimate source of all interdependence is the Supreme Truth or Paramatma, the Super Soul, who is not dependent on anything else. He is Svasrayashraya. He is only dependent on himself, and thus he is the supreme shelter of everything. Although Paramatma and Brahman are subordinate to Bhagavan, because Bhagavan is Purushottam, or the super person, he is the source of the Super Soul also. In the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna says that he is the Purushottam and the source of everything, and thus it is concluded that Sri Krishna is the ultimate source and shelter of all entities, including the Super Soul and Supreme Brahman. Even accepting that there is no difference between the Super Soul and the individual soul, the individual soul is dependent on the Super Soul for being liberated from the illusion of material energy. The individual is under the clutches of illusory energy, and therefore, although qualitatively one with the Super Soul, he is under the illusion of identifying himself with matter. And to get out of this illusory conception of factual life, the individual soul has to depend on the Super Soul to be recognized as one with him. In that sense also, the Super Soul is a supreme shelter, and there is no doubt about it. The individual living entity, the jiva, is always dependent on the Super Soul, Paramatma, because the individual soul forgets his spiritual identity, whereas the Super Soul, Paramatma, does not forget his transcendental position. In the Bhagavad Gita, these separate positions of the Jivatma and the Paramatma are specifically mentioned in the 4th chapter. Arjuna, the Jiva soul, is represented as forgetful of his many previous births, but the Lord, the Super Soul, is not forgetful. The Lord even remembers when he taught the Bhagavad Gita to the sun god some billions of years before. And the Lord can remember such millions and billions of years, as stated in the Bhagavad Gita as follows: Vedaham samatitani vata manani chaduna vivishami chabhutani mamtu veda nakashana. The Lord is in his eternal blissful body of knowledge, is fully aware of all that has happened in the past, that which is going on at the present, and also what will happen in the future. But in spite of his being the shelter of both the Paramatma and Brahman, persons with a poor fund of knowledge are unable to understand him as he is. The propaganda of the identity of cosmic consciousness with the consciousness of the individual living entities is completely misleading, because even such a person or individual soul as Arjuna could not remember his past deeds, although he is always with the Lord. And what can the tiny ordinary man, falsely claiming to be one with the cosmic consciousness, know about his past, present and future? Om Nagantunanda Jaganandana Shalakaya Shakshu Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Vansha Kalparubhascha Kripasundho Vegacha Pititnam Pavanabhyo Vaishnivo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivasadi Bhaktivinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Thank you for coming this morning. I seek your blessings. I can speak something of value. I always get nervous when the camera's on me. I'm wondering if I'll be on the next episode of Australia's Most Wanted or TV bloopers. But in the previous verse, it explained that each living entity is controlled by the devas or the demigods. And it's also explained in the previous verse that each of our senses are controlled by the demigods. So even our blinking and the movements of our body are controlled by certain demigods in the heavenly planets. And has anyone seen the movie Superman? Yeah, everyone's seen Superman. Well, there's a famous actor called Christopher Reeve, and he played the part of Superman, the Man of Steel. And he had an accident in his personal life. He fell off his horse and snapped his neck and became a quadriplegic. So externally it may seem that, it was an accident, a horse accident, but we understand that due to the influence of his karma and also the demigods had withdrawn that power for Christopher Reeve to use, his working senses. They'd taken away that power. So, even when I was younger, I didn't know much about karma, but I can remember quite clearly when I walked down a laneway at some point and a car pulled up in front of me, and a gentleman jumped out the back of the car, or out the side of the car, and opened the boot and pulled out a wheelchair, obviously for someone inside. And because wheelchairs, they kind of fold up, so he opened it up, and just as I was walking past, I saw the brand of the wheelchair was on the back, and it's called Karma. I was thinking, who would put, it's very ironic. They must know what karma is to put, their brand, called Karma on the wheelchair. So, as it says in the last text, it says that we're both living entities, right? Us, the living entities, and also the demigods, but we're controlled and they're empowered. And these positions are due to our previous work. So in our previous life we perform work and we get rewarded with a demigod body, or even a human body is a bit of a reward as well. And not only that do we get rewarded for a type of body, but we're also rewarded in a location that we get as well. Karma isn't just anatomical, like our bodily structure and what body we get, but it's also geographical. And the example they give is if we do good work, if you see the universe as like an apartment building, you have the sub-levels of the apartment building, the basement, then you have the ground level and the upper levels of the apartment block. So depending on what work we get, we might get a basement, like below the ground, and that's considered the lower planets of the universe. We may get put into that situation. If we perform reasonable work and we get a human birth, we might get a ground level, the Earth planet. And if we perform some more pious work, we might get a position in the upper levels of the apartment block, or in the upper levels of the planetary system, the higher planets, the heavenly planets. Does anyone know who in the universe occupies the penthouse suite in the universe? Yeah, Brahma. It's got amazing opulence. So Krishna, as a super soul, he rewards each living entity these different situations. And it's quite an illusion to think that we're controllers, even though we have a bit of a control, but we don't get to choose where we're born, we don't get to choose who we're born to, we don't really get to choose what body we have, and we don't get to choose, what diseases we get in life. These things are totally out of our control. But we can choose to come to Srimad Bhagavatam class. But maybe choosing coming to my class isn't such a good choice. But we do have a bit of independence to choose these things. So this verse particularly, it speaks about the interdependence of the living entity. And it's explained that there is Adi-Daivik, which means the demigods, Adi-Bhautik, which means other living entities, and Adi-Atmik, which means us, our individual living entities. And it's also referred as well that we also get sufferings, from the demigods with the heat and too much rain, and other living entities, and also with our own mind and body. And just recently I woke up in the morning and I wanted to come to Mangalarti. My alarm went off, and straight away the mind goes, no, we're not getting up this morning. And then I bargained with it, and after trying to reason with the mind at like 3 o'clock in the morning, I said, all right, if you come to Mangalarti, I'll get you a hot cup of milk and a burfi. Usually it works, and this time it did. It was like a deal. All right, I'll go to Mangalarti if I get the burfi and milk. So I dragged the mind to Mangalarti, and it's quite fascinating that if we just kind of ease into the program, particularly the nice prayers in the morning to the spiritual master, and we lean into it, the sound vibration has a very positive effect. And then if we stay in the morning program and we get into the japa where we do our meditation and become more absorbed in the chanting, it's amazing that I actually felt like I was a devotee again. Whereas an hour before I felt like I was battling the mind so much. So I can also relay this to a pastime in the Srimad Bhagavatam. And there's a lady called Diti, and she's a mother of the demons. And she has a sister called Aditi, and she's the mother of the demigods. Well, Didi had two nice sons, and they were the biggest materialists in existence. They were Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha. And Lord Indra and the demigods were getting harassed by these demons. So Lord Indra petitioned Vishnu to kill these demons because they are performing innocent terrorist activities within the universe. And so Indra did. He killed these two demons. And Didi became very, very disturbed. Her mind became obsessed with anger and envy, particularly towards Lord Indra. So she had a very wonderful husband. He was a devotee, Didi did, and his name was Kashyapa Muni. So Didi then started, after once her sons were killed, she started serving her husband with great attention and care, right, meticulously. And after a while, Kashyapa Muni, he saw his wife was serving him so nicely that his heart had been won over by his wife's service. So he turned to his wife and said, I'll give you a benediction, because it's a very powerful sage. He can give anything, actually. And his wife said, Didi, she said, I want a son that will kill Indra. And Kashyapa Muni went, oh no, like, what have I done? But Kashyapa Muni didn't blame himself. And he condemned himself, but didn't blame his wife, because he thought, this is understandable. My wife's mind is totally absorbed in anger and envy because of the death of her sons. So he devised a program. He said, okay, I'll give you a son because I've given you this benediction. And when you get pregnant, in the time that you're pregnant, you have to follow this process I'm going to give you. And he gave her the process of devotional service with quite a few rituals, Vaisnava rituals in there as well. And he said to his wife, if you follow this process till the time you're pregnant, you will get a son that will kill Indra. But he also knew that if she followed this process, that she would get purified. Her mind would become free from this anger and envy towards Indra. So she was determined, all right, I'll follow this process. But the sage also said, her husband, that if you deviate just a little bit from this process, guaranteed you'll have a son that will become the friend of Indra. So she had to perform it perfectly, and if there's a deviation, it would break her determination, and she'd have a son that would be a friend of Indra. So she started performing these activities of service, and funny enough, Diti was Indra's aunt, and she wanted a son that would kill Indra. So Indra went to her ashram, his aunt's ashram, and offered her some service with the intention that he wanted to spy on her. And if she became relaxed in her practice, he was going to try and interfere with this son that was going to get born from her. So he was serving his aunt very nicely, Didi, and she was performing all these activities of service. And towards the end of the pregnancy, Indra couldn't see that she was deviating. She was performing so perfectly. So Indra was sweating it like anything, because he knew that in a while he would be dead. Right? She would give birth to a son who would kill him. But then one morning she took some food, and she didn't wash her hands, mouth and feet. So this was like a compromise on her determination. So Indra, being the demigod that he is, and a bit envious, he entered into her womb. And there was an embryo there. And he cut that embryo into 7 pieces, and then another 7 pieces. He tried to kill the embryo, the living entity. And then it's explained that because there were 49 embryos, 49 living entities took shelter of those embryos. So there were 49 embryos. And Indra went to cut them to pieces again, and then the embryo said, hey Indra, don't kill us, we're your brothers. And they were demigods. And Srila Prabhupada explains that because she'd almost completed her kind of determination in these activities of service, she'd become purified. So much so that she gave up her lust and anger, her envy and anger towards Indra. And she gave birth to demigods, who were actually Indra's brothers. And we can see, if we just stick to this process, and a lot of us have trouble with our mind, if we can't convince it with a cup of milk and a burfi to come and serve Krishna, then at least we can come to the temple and at least give our ears to the process, and we'll find that our mind will become very peaceful and satisfied. Just like Didi, and also myself as well. And this interdependence, the definition, or I keep it quite simple, it means that we rely on others for things that we need, and they rely on things that we need. And a nice or a simple example is that we have a worker needs money and he needs maintenance from that money. So he goes to a boss, and the boss needs the workers because he wants to develop his business and he wants to make profit. So there's an interdependence there. And in the purport, it says that without the sun, the eyes cannot see. And without the eyes, the sun is useless. So there's also independence. In most things in the material world, there's this relationship that happens. And even though we see the sun as an object in the sky and it has lots of heat to sustaining our life, the Srimad Bhagavatam gives another perception of what the sun is actually doing. And it's explained, Ayu harvanti vai pumsan ujjan astam shayanaso tashate shachinonita uttamasloka vataya. So it says, both by rising and by setting, the sun diminishes the life of everyone in the material world. So this is one of the purposes of the sun, is to remind us that when it rises and sets, our lifespan is getting taken away. And it wouldn't be very romantic if you're sitting on the beach with your girlfriend or your boyfriend or whatever, and you're watching the sunset and you turn around and you go, oh yeah, my love, this sun that's setting is taking our lifespan away. She goes, oh man, you're pretty negative. What am I doing with you? So that's what the sun is doing for us. So the purport actually says, who makes them interdependent? And that's Krishna. The person who makes them, everything in the material world, interdependent, relying on each other, must be totally independent. And there's a word that we just spoke in this purport here, svasrayashraya. It means that Krishna doesn't depend upon anything. And is also apmarama, so he's self-satisfied. And in the material world, no one can be fully dependent or no one can be fully interdependent. There's all interdependent relationships. And the closest thing we can see to full dependence in the material world is a newborn baby to the mother. If you ask a mother how much they sleep in the first 3 months, they don't sleep very much because the little baby's totally dependent. And the devotee told me, the babies are really dependent when they're young, but when they get to teenage life, they don't want anything to do with their parents. And not only that, but you can tell a young dependent baby what to do, but with teenagers you can't tell them anything. And also if you want to know something, you ask a teenager. Does anyone know why?
They know everything.
Yeah, they know everything. So we can see that interdependent relationships in the material world are quite complicated and difficult. And I have the experience with my parents actually. We used to go out sailing. We had like a small yacht. And we used to have a group of friends that we'd go out sailing with. We'd meet together. And quite often we'd meet up on our holidays off of some location. And then I'd always, not always, but sometimes I'd say, oh, where are the jackets this year? Because, my parents had made friends with other parents and we'd develop friendships with the kids of those parents. And my mum and dad would go, oh, we're not friends with those anymore. So they've gone sailing at another part, they're over there. And, sometimes at home we'd have Christmas parties and then I'd go, oh, where are the Fries? And they go, oh, we didn't invite the Fries this year because we're not friends with their family anymore. And as a young kid, I couldn't understand, what are my parents doing? Why aren't we just all friends? Because kids, they're very innocent by nature and it's quite easy for kids to have nice relationships or friendships in general, but as adults or youths or young adults, we tend to make relationships very, very complicated. And I can remember in a tram in Melbourne, we're on the tram with all adults and some kids, and there was a couple kids, one was at the front of the tram and one was at the back, and suddenly you hear this voice, hey, do you want to come and play with me? And a kid was calling another one, so they just ran to each other and started getting their little cars and zooming them around the window. And I thought it's so sweet, kids get on so nicely, but if you were to turn around to an adult and go, oh, g'day mate, what are you looking at? What do you want? And they kind of move over on the seat, move away. So interdependent relationships are very difficult, and the Bhagavad Gita explains the reason why relationships are very difficult in the material world, because we come in contact with the modes of passion and ignorance. These are the lower energies, and they produce low qualities. And there's a verse in the Bhagavad Gita, it says, Nahi kashit shanamapi yatu tisidi kamakrit Kayate hivashaha kama sarve prakriti jaya gunai. Everyone is forced to act helplessly according to the qualities he has acquired from the modes of material nature. Therefore, no one can refrain from doing something, not even for a moment. So everyone is forced to act helplessly according to the qualities we have acquired from the modes. So there are two modes that we particularly associate with, passion, ignorance, and we develop certain qualities from contact with these modes. It's just like the air, when it goes over a rose garden, it contacts the fragrance of the rose and it carries that fragrance with the air. So similarly, when we come in contact with these modes of passion, ignorance, we take on these qualities. And the Bhagavad Gita explains the qualities of passion and ignorance, these lower modes, are lust, anger, envy, illusion, madness, like indolence, helplessness, hopelessness. So these are the qualities we take on when we associate with these modes. So practically speaking, when we have a relationship, we connect with people, it's a bit like saying, do you want to have a relationship with my passion, ignorance, madness, delusion, lust, envy? And they're also going to you, oh yeah, I'd love to have a relationship with that. Would you like to have a relationship with my lust, anger, madness, illusion, envy? So people get together and we take on these qualities and we're trying to have nice, friendly relationships. But you can see these qualities, they don't produce nice relationships. And we can see that having relationships, generally speaking, it's not a clear-cut thing for everyone. We do have relationships that are quite nice, but they're influenced by these qualities, so there's a lot of difficulty going on. And in the purport, it says that Sri Krishna is the ultimate shelter of everyone. And in the Nectar of Devotion, it's explained that Krishna has 64 transcendental qualities. These are the qualities that we're looking for in a relationship. Krishna he's expert, he has full compassion, he has full beauty, he has wisdom, he has generosity. And it's explained in the Nectar of Devotion, he has these qualities unlimitedly, perfectly. And we can't imagine, well, we should imagine, what it's like to have a relationship with the person with these qualities. When Krishna, in the spiritual world, he has his cowherd boyfriends, and he has picnics. And Krishna sits down for his picnic and all his cowherd boyfriends surround him, hundreds and thousands of his friends surround him for the picnic. And Krishna's in the centre, he's like in the whirl of the lotus flower. And they open their lunch boxes, because that's what a picnic is, you have food. And they offer their food to Krishna, and Krishna accepts and he gives them his food. But there's only one Krishna. So how does he do this? Krishna expands himself into unlimited forms. So each cowherd boy thinks that Krishna's just talking to me, and Krishna's joking with me, and Krishna's sharing his food with me. Everyone's having a direct relationship with Krishna, all the hundreds of thousands of cowherd boys. So Krishna, by this example, shows that he can reciprocate the loving desires and sentiments of everyone. It's so easy for Krishna to do. We have trouble maintaining one relationship. And there's a wonderful story in the Srimad Bhagavatam, and it's a story of Dhruva Maharaj. And Dhruva, he was just a small boy, 5 years old, and his father ruled the universe. And at some point, his name is King Uttanapad, he had two wives. One was the favoured queen and one was the neglected queen. So Dhruva took birth from the neglected queen. And at this point, the favoured queen's son was sitting on the king's lap, and young Dhruva wanted to climb up on the lap of his father. But the king rejected him because the favoured queen's son was on the lap, and because the king could see that the favoured queen was looking at him and her son was on the lap, he rejected Dhruva. And Dhruva at this point, he couldn't understand why this took place, because as a young boy. So he went to his mum. And his mum understood the situation, that you've been born from me and I'm the neglected queen, so therefore you've been rejected by your father. Although the king didn't really want to, it was just to the influence of his, of his favoured queen. And then he went to his mum, and his mum explained that actually, this hurt you're feeling in this relationship, because you've been hurt so much, nothing can help you overcome it except Krishna, taking shelter of Krishna. So he went to the forest, And in the purport it said that Krishna is fully aware of all the activities that the living entities are performing, past, present and future. So when Dhruva Maharaj went to the forest, Krishna, understanding his intention to find Krishna, he sent a spiritual master called Narada Muni. And Narada Muni, when he saw this young 5-year-old boy hurt and feeling this way, he tested him a little bit to see if he was very determined to search for Krishna. Or actually, Narada Muni was testing him. And he passed the test, so Narada Muni instructed him and also initiated him. And then Dhruva, as a 5-year-old boy, started performing severe austerities to attain Krishna. And in the first month, he was eating monkey fruit. I don't think monkey fruit's very nice. But he ate monkey fruit for a month, and then the second month, if monkey fruit was too enjoyable, he made the austerity more severe. He was eating only leaves. Right? Yum, yum. Right? I don't think leaves are very yum as well. But maybe after a while, he's considering that, the enjoyment from the leaves was too much, maybe eating banana leaves and mango leaves, so he went more severe. And then he was eating only air, or just surviving off air. And we had a wedding the other day. I mean, at the wedding, if we were to bring out the bain-marie trays, because Radha cooked an amazing feast, and then all the lids come off the bain-marie trays and there was nothing in there, we wouldn't be very happy, but maybe Dhruva would, because he was living off air. We'd be going, where's the cannelloni? Where's the good stuff? But he performed this severe austerity, and for performing austerity, he actually pleased his spiritual master in Krishna. And therefore Krishna appeared before this young boy and gave him his darshan. He appeared before Dhruva Maharaj. And even though Dhruva was so angry and so, hurt, by getting the association of Krishna, he became totally pacified and totally satisfied in his connection with Krishna. And it's also explained that Dhruva, because he was so angry towards his father and his stepmom, he wanted a kingdom greater than his father, Uttanapad, greater than his grandfather, Swayambhuva Manu, and his great-grandfather, Lord Brahma. Lord Brahma pretty much has the highest planet, or the greatest planet in the universe. So he wanted something greater than his. So Krishna then offered him a planet, Dhruva Maharaj's own planet. But Dhruva was thinking, actually, this is really silly, because I'm so satisfied with your shelter and association, Krishna, that these material desires, they seem so insignificant, like broken pieces of glass. You can imagine walking past broken glass, you wouldn't really pay much attention to it. So it seemed very, very insignificant. And when we do engage in devotional service and develop our relationship with Krishna, all these experiences of hurtful relationships we've had in our lives, and also these strong material desires which we're trying to take shelter of, they actually mean nothing in the association of Krishna and in the association of the devotees. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, there's a story of Narada Muni. Continuing on this story with Narada Muni, he was in Dwarka, and he was spending a lot of time in Dwarka at this point in time because he wanted to do a lot of service for Krishna. And if you want to do service, you go to Dwarka, because how many expansions of Krishna are in Dwarka? 1,108, and 16,108 palaces. So if you want to do service, there's a lot of service in Dwarka as a devotee. And I worked out that because there's 16,108 palaces and Krishnas, if you were to visit one a day, Narada Muni, you're taking 44 years to visit each palace. So Narada Muni decided, because Vasudeva was also staying, Krishna's father was also staying in Dwarka at this point in time. So Narada Muni thought, well, I'll go see Krishna's father, Vasudeva. So when he arrived at Vasudeva's palace, Vasudeva recognised Narada Muni and then offered his respects to Vasudeva. And he said, your visiting my palace is like a father visiting their children. It's very good, it's very auspicious. But Vasudeva was lamenting. He was considering, I worship Krishna to have him as my son. And I got him as my son, but Vasudeva realised that Krishna was departing from the world soon. So he was lamenting that Krishna is going back to the spiritual world and I'm staying here. Although that's not the reality. That's just, Vasudeva was always with Krishna. But it's just the influence of this spiritual energy that covers his devotees. So they think like this. And then Vasudeva went to Narada Muni. He said, please teach me, please explain devotional service to me. And then Narada Muni explained this story. He said there are these 9 personalities called the Nine Yogendras. He was explaining this story to Vasudeva. And these 9 Yogendras, they're the sons of Lord Rishabhdev. They're pure devotees. And he said these 9 Yogendras, they were travelling around the world or the universe naked. And they weren't interested in fashion. Just like Shikadeva Goswami and a few other sages, they travel around naked because they don't identify with the body. And they came across this King Nemi, a big sacrifice, like a ceremony. This King Nemi was holding these 9 Yogendras. And they appeared in the sacrifice and they were self-effulgent because they were perfectly spiritually liberated people, so they were glowing with their spiritual effulgence. And this King Nemi, he saw them and he thought, wow, this is amazing. I've got these pure devotees in my association, in my assembly. So him and the Brahmanas, they offered their respects and they worshipped these 9 Yogendras. And he took advantage of their association, because when we get the association of advanced people, we should take their association. So he asked each of these Yogendras 9 questions. So he asked one Yogendra a question each. And he asked one particular question to Kavir. And Kavir, he asked King Nemi to this Yogendra, Kavir, what is the archa? What is the behaviour of a Vaishnava? And this is very important because we hear the word acharya, like Srila Prabhupada's an acharya, and then we have many other acharyas. And an acharya, it means one who leads by his example, by his behaviour. It means they have perfect behaviour. And we can understand in Srila Prabhupada's life, what it is to have perfect behaviour. Every part of Srila Prabhupada's life that he displayed was perfect behaviour. And the reason why Narada Muni explained this story with this question of King Nemi to the Yogendra about what is behaviour of Vaishnava, because it helps us understand what is devotional service. If we understand Srila Prabhupada's behaviour, we can understand what is devotional service, how we should be applying ourselves in devotional service. And this behaviour that we should be displaying in devotional service is so important that Sanatana Goswami, he is a disciple of Lord Chaitanya, a very close associate of Krishna. He compiled many books, which Krishna Kirtan is very fond of one of them, the Brihat Bhagavatamrita, but another one called the Sri Hari Bhakti Vilas. And that whole book is just Vaishnava behaviour, teaching us how we should behave towards each other and towards the holy name and Krishna as well. And there's a story in the Chaitanya Charitamrita which helps us understand very good behaviour. And there's this devotee called Kalidas. He was in Navadvip. And he was an elderly devotee. He's very esteemed senior devotee or elderly devotee. And his way of getting the mercy of the Vaishnavas, by hook or crook, he would take the remnants of all the Vaishnavas. As many Vaishnavas as there were in Bengal, he would sneak their Mahaprasadam, their remnants, or he'd ask for it. If they didn't accept or offer it, he would steal it. And one day he was walking along the path and he came across a very wonderful devotee called Jadu Thakur. And after catching up with Jadu Thakur, they sat down and they were just enjoying each other's association. And Kalidas, he turned around to Jadu Thakur and he goes, Jadu Thakur, Prabhu, you're a very esteemed senior Vaishnava in Navadvip. I ask one thing, request one thing from you. Please give it to me. And Jadu Thakur says, yes, Prabhuji, what would you like? And Kalidas says, please place your feet on my head so I can get the dust. And Yadu Thakur goes, no, I cannot do this. Do not ask of this from me again. And then Yadu Thakur got up and left and he went home. And then as he was walking, he left his footprints in the dirt. So then Kalidas dove off the seat and jumped into the footprints left by Yadu Thakur and started smearing them over his head and body and rolling around. And then Kalidas was still very determined to get this mercy of Yadu Thakur. So he bought some mangoes and then he went to Yadu Thakur's house and he knocked on the door and left the mangoes at the front and ran off. And then Yadu Thakur's wife, she came out and she saw the mangoes but didn't see anyone. So she took the mangoes inside and she offered them to Raditi, and she offered the Mahaprasad, the prasad, to her husband, and she also partook. And at the end, she'd got the plates with the mango seeds and the mango pulp, and she went outside and she threw them outside into the refuge. And guess who was waiting there? Kalidas. He dove in and he licked the plate and he sucked the mango seeds and he was eating all the pulp. And he was in ecstasy actually. And then it's explained that later on, all the devotees, because Lord Chaitanya was in Jagannath Puri, all the devotees from Navadvip, Mayapur, they travelled to see Lord Chaitanya, including Kalidas. And when they got to Jagannath Puri, Lord Chaitanya, he went to the Jagannath Mandir and he was washing his feet. And he told his personal servant Govinda Das, do not allow anyone to get this water, all right? Don't let anyone get this mercy. And then as he was washing his feet, a hand came under Lord Chaitanya's feet. Guess who it was? Kalidas. And then took the water once, took the water twice, and took the water almost 3 times. And Lord Chaitanya stopped him, says, no more mercy. I cannot give you any more mercy. And later in the day, Lord Chaitanya was taking lunch. And his servant Govinda Das was serving him lunch. And then Lord Chaitanya said to Govinda Das, there's someone outside the door, taking this Mahaprasad and these remnants. Have a guess who it was? Kalidas. So then he opened the door and then, Kalidas was waiting there and he got the Mahaprasadam. And there's this verse in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. It says, Bhakti Pada Duli, Ara Bhakti Pada Jala, Bhakti Bhukti Vaishasha, Tina Mahabala. So it's explained that Bhakti Pada Duli, the dust from the feet, Bhakti Pada Jala, the water that has washed the feet, and Bhakti Bhukti Aveshasha, the remnants of the food left by the devotees, Tina Mahabala. These are 3 very powerful substances. So we can see with Kalidas that he got the full shelter of Lord Chaitanya Krishna because he had the right behaviour towards the Vaishnavas. Right? He had respect. Right? He had an eagerness to serve the devotees, and he was also very humble. And these qualities are what will qualify us to get the shelter of Krishna. You know, I'm sitting here on the Vyasasana and I've got my nice shaved head, I've got my nice pakasika, and I've got my big beads, you know, and I wear all my nice silks and my socks, nice socks. And if you want to look like a real devotee, then you've got to get the most important attire, and that's your Birkenstock shoes. And I got those outside as well, you know, so I'm looking like a devotee. But after reading these pastimes and we see the behaviour of the devotee, it's a very high standard. Although devotees don't behave improperly, but we can see, you know, we have a lot of improvement to do. We can refine our behaviour. And this is what will get us Krishna's mercy. We stand in front of the deities every morning and we look at Krishna and we think Krishna's so beautiful. And that's a nice approach, that's a nice appreciation, but Krishna knows he's beautiful. Even Radharani knows Krishna's beautiful. So when we stand in front of the deities, we should ask Krishna, and particularly Radharani, that we can develop the right behaviour and the right attitude so we can get their shelter. And we pray for that very much. We're almost out of time. Does anyone have any reflections or any comments or any corrections? Rupa Raghunath Prabhu. We'll just wait for the microphone, Prabhu.
You were saying that when all the cowherd boys are sitting around Krishna taking lunch, each one's thinking that only he's with Krishna. They can't see all the other Krishnas. The same with Krishna and the Rasa dance with the gopis. Is there any description that each one of those cowherd boys or the gopis, because they can't see the other Krishnas with the other cowherd boys or the gopis, that they're feeling sad for the other gopis or cowherd boys, thinking that, you know, wish Krishna was with them as well.
The nature of relationships in the material world, that's a nice question, is that when we don't have the association of someone, you know, we feel separation. There's that feeling, you know, that we need to have personal contact with someone to have a relationship develop. And if we don't have that relationship, then we feel separation. But the unique thing in the spiritual world that everyone in their relationship is fully satisfied. Even the bees. The bees are satisfied in their relationship with Krishna. The flowers, the plants and the birds. So everyone is 100% fully satisfied in their relationship with Krishna. So no one is lacking in the spiritual world. They have 100% of their devotion and their love being reciprocated by Krishna. So, and no one senses in the spiritual world that they're not getting what they need from Krishna. In the material world, when we see, you know, two people together and then one person leaves, then we consider, oh, that person, you know, they must be feeling separation or hurt because they're not in close contact with each other. But in the spiritual world, that doesn't exist. I haven't heard of any examples like that, but we can read the pastimes in, you know, what happens in the spiritual world to the devotees, and we can understand, yeah, they're fully satisfied in their relationship. They don't see anyone else in the spiritual world as, you know, deficient or not being satisfied. Can you add anything to that? Maybe Krishna Kirtan's got a comment on that.
I have a question about you said that we qualify for Krishna's mercy by how we interact with devotees. Can you give some examples? Maybe Interdependent it seems the most way how we can, because we also need to discriminate. If someone is not following properly or someone is new, there's different levels of interaction. So the external interaction and then the internal mood of how we should be to qualify for Krishna's mercy.
Yeah, if they're in the nectar of instruction, we can keep it simple, but Krishneti Yasha Giritam Manasa Driyeta Diksha Shishe Panata Vishja Pajanta Misham Shashushya Bhagyam Vigyam Ananya Nina Nindadi Shunya Hridi Ifsida Labja Sangha. So it's explained that when we meet someone, actually this is Rupa Goswami, he explains that Krishneti Yashakiritam Manasa Driyata. When we see someone more qualified than ourselves, we should feel pleasure and happiness. When we see someone less qualified than ourselves, we should feel compassion. And when we see someone equal with ourselves, we should make friendship. So we should just actually see people on different levels, but we should learn how to interact with them. And one of the moves that we should take into interacting with any devotee, as like this verse explains, that we should be respectful on all levels. Understanding that, you know, we're trying to align ourselves in devotional service. We've come from the material world, and anyone that comes onto the property has been personally invited by Krishna. And we should make sure that we apply these principles on learning how to interact. We should be compassionate towards them, understanding that we take the responsibility of lifting them up to a higher level of Krishna consciousness. And Srila Prabhupada, he also mentioned that we should be like honeybees. Right? Honeybees, they just look for the nectar, the good in everyone. And we can see with Srila Prabhupada's mood as well. Srila Prabhupada was met, and he didn't even have devotees when he started the Krishna conscious movement. You know, everyone was just very new and out of the material world, but Srila Prabhupada, led by his example, that he took the essence on anyone, all the people that wanted to engage in Krishna's service, and he encouraged them in that way. So externally we be respectful and we interact with devotees with respect, but internally we should develop a sense of compassion towards the other devotees on any level. Anyone else? Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.